remember the sound of the monitor more than anything else. Not loud, not urgent, just steady, like nothing important was happening at all. And maybe that was the most unsettling part. Because something important was happening. I just wasn't supposed to be there to see it. Let her go, we're not paying for that. My father said it calmly. Not angry. Not emotional. Not even tired. Just practical. Like he was declining an extended warranty. I didn't open my eyes right away. Not because I couldn't, but because something inside me needed a second longer to understand what I had just heard. The air in my throat still burned from the tube they had taken out hours earlier. My ribs felt like they had been rearranged by someone who didn't plan on putting them back correctly. My body was slow, heavy, distant. But my hearing? Perfect. And I heard everything. She's not going to recover enough to justify that cost, he continued, voice low, controlled. I'm her father. I'm making the call. A pause. Then the quiet rustle of paper. Then a pen. I didn't need to see it to know what was happening. I worked in a hospital. I had handed that exact form to families before. Do not resuscitate. A decision you make when you believe someone's life has already ended, just not officially. Except I was still here. Still breathing. Still listening. Still, me. The doctor said something I couldn't fully make out. There was hesitation in his voice. Not refusal, but not agreement either. The kind of tone people use when they're standing too close to something wrong but don't know how to step away. Is there no one else? He asked. No, my father replied immediately. There's no one else. That part almost made me laugh. If my chest hadn't been wired together, I might have. Because there was someone else. There had been for years. But my father didn't know that. Or maybe he chose not to. The pen scratched against paper. Short, final, decisive. And just like that, my life had a price. And it wasn't high enough. I kept my eyes closed. Not out of fear. Not out of weakness. But because something inside me was shifting and I needed to stay very still while it happened. Like when a bone sets itself after a break. Painful, quiet, permanent. He didn't come closer to the bed. Didn't touch my hand. Didn't say goodbye. His footsteps moved away. Slow, unhurried. The door opened. Closed. And I was alone again. Except I wasn't the same person who had been brought into that room. That version of me, the one who still believed love and obligation were the same thing. She didn't survive that conversation. I lay there for a long time, listening to the machine, feeling each breath like it had to ask permission to stay. And somewhere between one breath and the next, a thought settled in. Clear, quiet, unshakable. I wasn't going to confront him. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't even going to ask why. Because some of you listening already know this feeling, when the truth is so obvious that asking questions would only insult your own intelligence. No, I was going to do something else. Something he would never expect. I was going to let him believe it worked. And then, I was going to make sure it cost him everything. If you're here with me right now, tell me where you're listening from. I always wonder how far these stories travel. Because what happened next didn't begin with anger. It began with something much quieter, much colder. Clarity. There's a strange kind of silence that follows betrayal. Not loud. Not chaotic. Just empty. I didn't cry. Not when I heard the door close. Not when the hallway faded back into its usual rhythm of distant footsteps and rolling carts. And not even when I finally opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling that I knew too well. Hospitals always smell the same. Antiseptic. Plastic. Something faintly metallic beneath it all. I had worked under those lights for 6 years. I had comforted families in rooms just like this. I had explained procedures. Held hands. Watched monitors flatten. But I had never imagined I'd be the one lying here. Fully aware. While someone else decided whether I was worth saving. My throat burned when I tried to swallow. My body didn't feel like mine yet. Every movement was delayed, like commands had to travel through water before they reached my limbs. But my mind? Sharp. Too sharp. And it kept replaying his voice. We're not paying for that. Not we can't. Not we don't have options. Just, we won't. Some of you listening know the difference. That moment when you realize it was never about circumstances, it was about choice. I turned my head slightly. The effort alone made my ribs protest. There was a window to my left, blinds half open. Morning light leaked through in thin, pale stripes. Soft. Indifferent. For a second, I wondered what day it was. How long I'd been gone. What version of me people thought they were about to bury. Because that's what he expected, wasn't it? A phone call. A time of death. A clean ending. I let out a slow breath. Careful, measured. Like I was learning how to exist again. And that's when I noticed something. The IV line in my arm. Fresh. Recently adjusted. Which meant someone had been here. After him. The door opened quietly. I didn't turn right away. I just listened. Soft footsteps. Confident. Unrushed. Hey, a voice said gently. Not my father. Not my sister. Familiar. Steady. I turned my head just enough to see her. Pat. She didn't rush over. Didn't panic. Didn't call out for anyone. She just pulled a chair beside my bed and sat down like she had been waiting for this moment all night. You're awake, she said. Simple. Certain. I tried to speak. It came out like sandpaper. How long? 3 weeks, she replied. No hesitation. No sugarcoating. 3 weeks. I closed my eyes again. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because I was calculating. 3 weeks meant surgeries, decisions, conversations I hadn't been part of. 3 weeks where someone else had control. And I already knew how he had used it. When I opened my eyes again, Pat was still there. Watching me. Not with pity. Not even with sympathy. With something else. Respect. There are some things you need to know, she said. Her voice was low. Careful. Not urgent. But important. I didn't ask what. I didn't need to. Because deep down, I already knew this wasn't the worst part. And if you've ever had that feeling, when the truth hasn't even fully arrived yet, but your body already braces for it, you understand exactly where I was in that moment. I shifted slightly. Pain shot through my side. I didn't react. I'm listening, I whispered. Pat nodded once. She leaned forward just a little, resting her hands on her knees. And for the first time since I woke up, I felt something close to steady. Not safe. Not yet. But not alone either. Before she spoke, she held my gaze for a second longer than usual. Like she was giving me a chance to prepare. Or maybe a chance to decide if I really wanted to hear it. I didn't look away. Because whatever came next, I needed the truth, not comfort. And Pat? She wasn't the kind of person who gave comfort when the truth mattered more. She took a breath. And everything in my life shifted again. If you're still here, stay with me. Some truths don't break you all at once. They unfold. Slowly. And the next part? That's where everything started to make sense. Some truths don't arrive like a storm. They arrive like a sentence, spoken quietly. And somehow, that makes them harder to survive. The night of your accident, Pat said, your father came to the hospital. I nodded slightly. Of course he did. That part made sense. He didn't come to see you first. That part didn't. I kept my face still. But something inside me leaned closer. He went to billing, she continued, asked how much the surgery would cost. There it was again. That word. Cost. I stared at the blanket over my legs. White. Too clean. Like nothing ugly was supposed to exist in a place like this. And then? I asked. My voice was steadier this time. Pat didn't rush. She never did. He spoke to the surgeon, she said. Asked for an estimate. A pause. Then, when they told him, he said no. No. Not wait. Not what are the options. Just no. My chest rose slowly. Carefully. And the DNR? I asked. Pat met my eyes. He signed it. There it was. Not a misunderstanding. Not a mistake. A decision. I let that sit between us. Didn't push it away. Didn't soften it. Because some of you listening know this moment. When something you've always felt finally gets confirmed out loud. And instead of shock, you feel recognition. Like your whole life just rearranged itself into something that finally makes sense. I wasn't surprised. That's what scared me the most. I swallowed. Slow. What exactly did he say? I asked. Pat didn't hesitate this time. Let her go. We're not paying for the surgery. She's been a financial drain her whole life. The words didn't hit me like a knife. They landed like something familiar. Like a sentence I had been hearing. In different forms. Since I was a child. I closed my eyes. Not to escape it. But to finally stop pretending it wasn't real. I didn't cry. Not right away. I kept my eyes closed, listening to the monitor beside me. Steady, indifferent, like none of this mattered. Because the truth was, it didn't surprise me. That was the part I couldn't explain to anyone else. Not even to Pat. When you grow up being reminded again and again that you cost too much, at some point, you stop seeing yourself as a person. You start seeing yourself as a number. A bill. A burden. A problem that never fully goes away. And hearing him say it out loud, it didn't break something in me. It confirmed something. I opened my eyes slowly. The ceiling came back into focus. Same pale tiles. Same fluorescent hum. How am I still here? I asked. Pat leaned back slightly in her chair. Like she had been waiting for that question. I checked your file, she said. That caught my attention. Your employee file, she clarified. You listed a healthcare proxy. My mind moved slower than usual, but it got there. Deborah. Of course. 3 years ago. A form most people skipped. One I had filled out without thinking too much about it. I called her, Pat continued. She drove in the middle of the night, brought her copy, overturned the DNR, approved the surgery. I stared at her. Not shocked. Not overwhelmed. Just quiet. Because in the middle of everything my father had done, someone else had chosen differently. Someone who wasn't obligated, wasn't family, but showed up anyway. Some of you listening know what that feels like. When the person who saves you isn't the one who was supposed to. It changes how you see everything. Is it documented? I asked. Pat nodded once. Everything. A small breath left my chest. Careful. Measured. Not relief. Not yet. But something close to grounding. Because now, this wasn't just a feeling. It was a record. A fact. I turned my head slightly toward the window again. Light had shifted. Time had passed. And for the first time since I woke up, I wasn't thinking about why he did it. I was thinking about what came next. Can I have my phone? I asked. Pat didn't question it. She reached into the drawer, placed it gently in my hand. The screen lit up. Missed calls. Messages. His name, repeated over and over. I scrolled past all of them, because there was only one name that mattered right now. The one my grandmother had given me. Kesler. I pressed call, held the phone to my ear. It rang twice. Then a calm voice answered. I've been waiting for you to wake up. His voice was calm. Too calm. I've been trying to reach you for months, he said. Months. I tightened my grip on the phone slightly. My ribs protested, but I didn't move. I'm in the hospital, I said. I was in an accident. A brief pause. Not confusion. Not surprise. Adjustment. I see, he replied. That explains a great deal. Of course it did. Because someone had been answering for me. Speaking in my place. Closing doors I didn't even know existed. My grandmother, I said slowly. She mentioned your name. Yes, he said. She came to me 2 years ago. I could picture it suddenly. Her sitting across from a desk. Hands folded. Eyes sharp. Not confused. Not fragile. Certain. She wanted everything handled privately, he continued. Outside of your family's influence. That word landed softly. Influence. A cleaner way to describe control. She made a will, he said. Very clear. Very specific. I held my breath without realizing it. The house on Elm Street, he continued, and a trust account, both left solely to you. Solely. Not shared. Not divided. Mine. I stared at the wall in front of me, but I wasn't seeing it anymore. I was seeing my father at the hospital, asking one question. How much? I sent letters, Kesler added. They were returned. I called. I was told you didn't want contact. Of course. I didn't even need to ask who said that. Some of you listening understand this kind of silence. When someone edits your life without your permission. I never said that, I replied. I assumed as much, he said quietly. Of course he did. Because people like him? They recognize patterns. And the house? I asked. A pause. Longer this time. I'll need to confirm the current status, he said. I'll call you back shortly. Shortly. I lowered the phone slowly after the call ended. Let it rest against my chest. The room felt different now. Not safer. But clearer. Because something had shifted. This wasn't just about what my father had done in that hospital room. It was bigger. Older. Planned. And somewhere, my grandmother had already seen it coming. If you're still here, stay with me. Because the next call, that's when everything stopped being a suspicion and became something much harder to ignore. The call came back in 53 minutes. I remember because I counted. Not seconds, just the slow movement of time in a room where nothing changes unless someone makes it. Miss Thomas, Kesler said, and this time his voice carried something different. Not calm. Not entirely. Measured, but sharper. The property has been transferred out of your name. I didn't react right away. I watched the IV drip instead. One drop. Then another. Transferred to who? I asked. Gerald Thomas, he said. Your father. Of course. It didn't feel like shock. It felt like something clicking into place. How? I asked. A power of attorney, he replied. I let out a quiet breath. Slow. Controlled. I never signed one. I'm aware, he said. The original records show no such authorization through my office. A pause. My professional opinion, he added. It's forged. The word didn't echo. It settled. Because by now, there was nothing left in me that wanted to defend him. And there's more, Kesler continued. A mortgage has been taken out against the property, 6 days ago. I closed my eyes briefly. Not to escape it. Just to absorb it. How much? I asked. $280,000. The number sat there. Heavy. But not surprising. Some of you listening know this moment. When the scale of betrayal grows, but your emotional reaction doesn't. Because you've already crossed the line where surprise lives. He used the house, I said quietly. Yes. I reached for the pen beside my bed. My hand didn't shake. That surprised me. Maybe because this wasn't chaos anymore. This was structure. Evidence. A pattern. What are my options? I asked. Kesler didn't hesitate. We can file to void the transfer. Notify the lender. Initiate a fraud investigation. Practical. Clear. The opposite of everything my father had just done. I wrote down every detail he gave me. Dates. Amounts. Names. Each one felt like a piece of something being rebuilt. Not revenge. Control. Because for the first time, I wasn't reacting to him. I was moving ahead of him. Before we ended the call, Kesler added one more thing. Your grandmother left you a letter, he said. Sealed. She asked me to deliver it in person. A letter. From the only person who had never made me feel like I owed her something. When? I asked. Tomorrow morning. I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. I'll be here. The call ended. I set the pen down, looked at the list in my hand, and then I added one more line at the bottom. 11:18 p.m. The time my father signed the DNR. Because this wasn't just about money anymore. This was a timeline. And timelines tell the truth in a way people can't hide from. If you're still listening, stay with me. Because the next morning, I finally understood what my grandmother had really given me. And it wasn't just a house. The next morning didn't feel dramatic. No storm. No sense of something about to explode. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes when a decision has already been made, and all that's left is to follow through. Kesler arrived at exactly 9 a.m. Not early. Not late. Precise. He walked in with the same steady presence I'd heard in his voice. Gray suit. Worn leather briefcase. No unnecessary movement. People like him don't rush. Because they don't need to. Miss Thomas, he said, offering a small nod as he sat beside my bed. No sympathy. No dramatics. Just respect. I brought everything, he added. He placed the envelope on the table beside me. Simple. Unmarked except for one thing. My name. In my grandmother's handwriting. That was the first moment my composure shifted. Not when I heard about the house. Not when I learned about the fraud. But this. Because this wasn't about documents. This was her. I picked up the envelope slowly, careful with my fingers, like it might disappear if I moved too fast. Some of you listening understand this kind of moment, when something small carries more weight than everything else combined. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly. Her handwriting was thinner than I remembered, but steady. Wendy, it began. I had to pause. Just seeing my name written like that, without expectation, without weight, it did something to me I wasn't ready for. I kept reading. She wrote about my father, not with anger, not even with disappointment, just clarity. She knew what he was capable of. She had seen it long before I allowed myself to, and she had prepared. Quietly, carefully, the house, the money, the lawyer, not as gifts, as protection. My throat tightened. Because, for the first time, I understood something I had missed my entire life. Love doesn't always look loud. Sometimes, it looks like planning, like making sure someone will be safe, even when you're no longer there to protect them. I lowered the letter slowly. My hands weren't shaking, but something inside me had softened. Not toward my father, toward myself. Kesler placed a folder beside me. Everything you need is here, he said. I nodded. Not overwhelmed. Not emotional. Just ready. Because this wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about standing in something that had already been decided. My grandmother knew, I said quietly. Kesler gave a small nod. Yes, he replied. She did. I looked at the folder, then back at the letter, and for the first time since I woke up, I didn't feel like I was catching up to my life. I felt like I was stepping into it. If you've ever had someone believe in you before you believed in yourself, you know how powerful that moment is. Because what I was about to do next didn't come from anger. It came from something much steadier. Permission. Leaving the hospital felt quieter than I expected. No dramatic goodbye. No emotional release. Just paperwork. A signature. A slow walk down a hallway I had spent years walking for other people. Only this time, it was mine. My father showed up right on time. 10 a.m. Like nothing had happened. He stood near the entrance holding a small suitcase. Already decided. "You're coming home with us," he said. Not a question. An instruction. I looked at the suitcase, then at him. For a second, I saw the version of myself who would have said yes, out of habit, out of guilt, out of that quiet belief that I owed him something. But that version of me was still lying in that hospital bed. "Deborah's picking me up," I said calmly. The shift in his face was small. Most people wouldn't notice it. But I had spent my whole life reading him. Control. Slipping. "You'd rather stay with a stranger?" he asked. "She's not a stranger," I replied. "She's my emergency contact." That word hung in the air for a second. Contact. Something flickered behind his eyes. A calculation. But it didn't land. "Not yet." "Fine," he said. Short. Tight. He picked up the suitcase. Turned. Walked out. No goodbye. And strangely, that felt more honest than anything else he had done. That evening, my phone buzzed. A message from Meredith. "Dad's really upset. You're being ungrateful." I stared at the screen. Ungrateful. That word again. The one that gets used when someone stops accepting what they were never supposed to carry. I didn't reply. Some of you listening have reached this point before. When silence becomes the first real boundary you've ever set. At Deborah's apartment, everything felt different. Not bigger. Not better. Just safe. She didn't ask questions right away. Didn't push. Didn't try to fix anything. She just placed a glass of water in front of me and sat across the table. "I'm here," she said. And that was it. No conditions. No expectations. Just presence. I exhaled slowly. Because, for the first time, I wasn't surrounded by people who expected something from me. I was surrounded by someone who chose me. That night, I called Kesler again. We went over everything. Timeline. Documents. Next steps. Each piece falling into place with quiet precision. "This needs to be done carefully," he said. "I know," I replied. But in my mind, it wasn't just about careful. It was about where. Because truth doesn't just matter. It matters where it's spoken. And I already knew the place my father trusted the most. "Sunday," I said. A pause. Then, "I understand." I hung up. Sat there for a while. Not thinking about revenge. Just alignment. Because what I was about to do, it wasn't about hurting him. It was about no longer protecting him. And those are two very different things. Sunday mornings used to feel predictable. Routine. Safe. That was the illusion my father built his entire life on. First Grace Community Church. White walls. Wooden pews. Familiar faces that smiled before you even spoke. A place where people believed what they were told. Because they trusted who was saying it. My father understood that better than anyone. He didn't just attend. He belonged. 15 years as a deacon. Handshakes at the door. Scripture readings in a steady voice. Stories about sacrifice, about family, about doing what's right. And people believed him. Because consistency looks a lot like truth. When no one has a reason to question it. Deborah parked near the back. Engine off. Silence. "You don't have to do this today," she said. I looked at the building. At the doors I had walked through my entire life. "I know," I replied. "That's why I am." Some of you listening understand this kind of moment. When you realize it's not about courage. It's about timing. And the timing is finally yours. I stepped out of the car slowly. My ribs reminded me I wasn't fully healed yet. But I didn't stop. Kesler was already there. Standing near the entrance. Briefcase in hand. He didn't ask if I was ready. He just gave a small nod. That was enough. Inside, the service had already started. Soft music. Voices blending together. I slipped into the last row. Quiet. Unnoticed. From there, I could see him. Front row. Of course. Sitting straight. Hands folded. The version of himself everyone recognized. At one point, he turned. Saw me. His face lit up instantly. Relief. Pride. Control. Restored. He waved. I waved back. Small. Measured. Because this wasn't the moment. Not yet. The service ended. People moved. Voices filled the room again. The fellowship hall slowly filled with familiar noise. Plates, chairs, conversations overlapping. And then, as always, my father walked to the front. The microphone waited for him. It always did. He tapped it lightly. The room settled. I want to share something personal today, he began. His voice carried easily. Warm. Controlled. As many of you know, my daughter was in a serious accident. A pause. Perfectly timed. The doctors weren't sure she would make it. Another pause. But God is faithful. Murmurs. Nods. And today, she's here with us. He turned. Gestured toward me. All eyes followed. And for a moment, I felt what he wanted them to feel. Gratitude. Relief. A story with a clean ending. But stories like this don't end clean. Not when the truth hasn't been told yet. If you're still here, stay with me. Because what happened next wasn't loud. It was something much more powerful. It was quiet and impossible to ignore. I didn't rush. I didn't interrupt him mid-sentence. I just waited. Because timing matters more than volume. He finished his story the way he always did, with emotion placed exactly where it needed to be. As a father, he said, voice softening, there's nothing more terrifying than almost losing your child. A few people nodded. Someone near the front wiped their eyes. I prayed every night, he added. I never left her side. That was the moment. Not because it was the biggest lie, but because it was the most complete one. I stepped forward. Slowly. Each step measured. Not dramatic. Not rushed. Just certain. Dad, I said, loud enough for the front rows to hear. Can I say something? He didn't hesitate. He couldn't. Not here. Not in front of everyone who had just watched him become the devoted father. Of course, he said, smiling. He handed me the microphone, still warm from his hand. I took it, turned, faced the room, and for a second, I just stood there. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted them to feel the shift. I'm really grateful to be here, I began. Honest. Because I was. But I need to correct something. The room stilled. Not tense yet. Just attentive. My father wasn't by my side every day. A small ripple. He came once, the night of the accident. I didn't look at him. Because this wasn't about watching his reaction. This was about telling the truth. He didn't come to see me first, I continued. He went to billing. Now the room changed. Subtle, but real. And when they told him how much the surgery would cost, I paused. Not for effect, but because some words deserve space before they land. He said, let her go. We're not paying for that. Silence. Not confusion. Not disbelief. The kind of silence that happens when people don't want to move. Because moving would mean acknowledging what they just heard. And then, I added, steady, he signed a Do Not Resuscitate order. Some of you listening know this kind of silence. When truth enters a room, and no one knows where to put it. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't rush to explain. I just stood there and let it exist. No one spoke. Not immediately. The room held still in a way I had never seen before. Not even during prayer. Because prayer invites silence. This forced it. My father stepped closer. Just slightly. "Wendy," he said, voice low, controlled. "You're confused." I didn't turn. "I have the hospital report," I replied. Simple. Documented. Real. That word report shifted something in the room. Because feelings can be dismissed. But records? They stay. "This isn't the place for this," he said. I nodded once. "You chose this place," I answered. "You just didn't expect the truth to show up." A few people shifted in their seats. Not away. Closer. That's what truth does. It pulls people in even when they don't want it to. The side door opened quietly, and Kesler walked in. Not rushed. Not dramatic. Just present. He moved to stand beside me. Set his briefcase down. Opened it with calm precision. My father saw him. And something changed. For the first time, he didn't look controlled. He looked uncertain. "This is Mr. Kesler," I said. "My grandmother's attorney." A murmur passed through the room. Her name still meant something here. "She left me her house," I continued. "Legally. Months ago." I let that sit. And while I was in a coma, I glanced at my father now. Just once. He transferred it into his name. The room tightened. With a power of attorney I never signed. Kesler lifted a document. Didn't wave it. Didn't perform. Just held it where it could be seen. "The original will," he said calmly. "Solely to Wendy Thomas. No anger. No emphasis. Just fact. And facts don't need volume." My father shook his head quickly. "That's not," he started. But the sentence didn't finish. Because something in the room had already shifted beyond him. People weren't looking at me anymore. They were looking at him. And not the way they used to. If you've ever watched someone's image change in real time, you know how quiet it gets. I held the microphone a little closer. Not tighter. Just steady. "I'm not here to embarrass you," I said. And I meant that. "I'm here because you tried to let me die." No one moved. And when that didn't work, I paused. "You took what wasn't yours." The truth didn't echo. It settled. Heavy. Final. And there was nowhere left in the room for it to hide. My father looked around the room. Not at me. At them. Like he was searching for something familiar. Something that would put everything back where it belonged. Support. Agreement. Doubt just enough to break what I had said. "She's on medication," he said finally. "She doesn't know what she's saying." It was a good move. It always had been. Discredit the source, and the truth weakens with it. But not this time. Because this wasn't just my voice anymore. It was paper. Dates. Signatures. Things that don't get confused. Kesler stepped forward slightly. Not aggressive. Just present. "The documents have already been filed with the county," he said. "The transfer is under legal review." No emotion. Just direction. And suddenly, this wasn't a family disagreement. It was a process. Someone near the back spoke. Quiet but clear. Then why would he need a power of attorney at all? The question hung there. My father didn't answer. Because there wasn't a version of this story that made sense anymore. Not the one he had told. Not the one he believed he could keep telling. I lowered the microphone slightly. Not to stop speaking. Just to change how I was speaking. "I didn't come here to take anything from you," I said. And that was true. I came here to stop pretending. Because that's what this had always been. A performance. And, for the first time, it had ended. If you've ever had to be the one who breaks that silence, you know it doesn't feel powerful. It just feels necessary. And necessary things. Don't wait for permission. My sister stood up slowly. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just deliberate. "Dad," she said, her voice thinner than I remembered. Stop talking. The room shifted again. Not toward me. Toward her. Because silence is one thing. But when someone from inside the story speaks, it changes everything. My father reached for her arm. Not hard, but firm enough to be seen. Tell them, he said. Tell them I was trying to protect this family. Protect. That word almost made me look away. But I didn't. Because I needed to see what she would do. Some of you listening know this moment. When someone has to choose between truth and comfort. She pulled her arm back. Not fast. Not angry. Just enough. Her eyes moved across the room, avoiding faces. Avoiding mine. I can't do this, she said. And for a second, it sounded like an escape. Like she was leaving the moment instead of stepping into it. But then, as she walked past me, close enough that only I could hear, she whispered, I knew. 2 words. That was all it took. Because suddenly, this wasn't just about my father anymore. It was about silence. The kind that doesn't come from ignorance, but from choice. I didn't stop her. Didn't turn. Didn't call her back. Because some exits say everything they need to. The door closed behind her, and the room felt heavier. Not louder. Just clearer. I lifted the microphone again. Not to accuse, but to finish. I'm not telling you this to destroy him, I said. And that was the truth. I'm telling you this because for years, I believed something about myself that wasn't true. I paused. Let that sit. That I was a burden. No movement. No sound. But that belief didn't start with me. I didn't need to explain the rest. They could see it now. Not all at once, but enough. And sometimes, enough truth is all it takes. My father stopped trying to speak. That was the first real change. Not because he ran out of words, but because he realized they weren't working anymore. He looked around the room again, and this time, no one moved toward him. No reassuring nods. No quiet support. Just distance. The kind that doesn't need to be announced. It just appears. Gerald, someone said from the side. It was Robert. Another deacon. A man who had stood beside my father for years. I think you should sit down. Not harsh. Not angry. But firm. My father didn't argue. That might have been the most honest thing he'd done all morning. He stepped back. Sat on the edge of a table. Not a chair. A table. Like he didn't quite know where he belonged anymore. I watched him for a moment. Not with anger. Not with satisfaction. Just recognition. Because this was the part no one talks about. When the story shifts. Not with noise. But with absence. No one defending you. No one echoing your version. Just silence where support used to be. I turned back to the room. I've already filed everything, I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The deed transfer is being reviewed. The bank has been notified. There's an active investigation. Each sentence landed clean. No drama. No performance. Just consequence. My father let out a slow breath. You'd do this to your own family? He asked. There it was. The last place people go when everything else fails. Family. I looked at him. Really looked this time. You signed something to let me die, I said. No anger. Just truth. And you're asking me about family? He didn't answer. Because there wasn't anything left to say that wouldn't make it worse. Some of you listening understand this moment. When the roles reverse, and the person who held power no longer does. Not because you took it, but because you stopped giving it. I lowered the microphone. My hands were steady. My breath was even. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small in that room. I felt accurate. And that was enough. No one clapped. That was the first thing I noticed. Not because I expected it, but because in that room, after every testimony, every story, every moment, there was always some kind of response. A sound, a release. This time, nothing. Just people sitting there, holding what they had just heard. And maybe that was more honest than anything else. I set the microphone down on the nearest table. Not gently, not dramatically, just finished. "I'm sorry for disrupting your Sunday," I said. And I meant that too. Because this wasn't what anyone came here for. "My grandmother loved this place," I added. "She would have wanted the truth spoken here." That part felt important. Not for them. For me. Because this wasn't about taking something from my father. It was about returning something to myself. Truth. A few people stood. Slowly. Not rushing toward me. Not rushing toward him. Just moving. Processing. One woman approached first. I didn't recognize her. She didn't say anything. She just placed her hand over mine for a second, then nodded, and walked away. That was enough. Some of you listening understand that kind of support. The kind that doesn't ask questions, doesn't need explanations. It just acknowledges. Across the room, I saw Pat, standing near the coffee table. She didn't smile, didn't wave. She just gave a small nod. The same one she gave me in the hospital. Steady. Certain. "You're okay." I nodded back. Because for the first time, I believed it. My father hadn't moved. Still sitting there. Hands together. Eyes down. Smaller than I had ever seen him. Not defeated. Just exposed. And exposure doesn't need noise. It does its work quietly. I picked up my bag. Kesler closed his briefcase beside me. No rush. Because everything that needed to happen already had. As I turned toward the door, I paused for just a second. Not to look back, but to notice something I had never felt in that building before. Space. There was finally space between who he said I was and who I knew I was. And I wasn't in a hurry to fill it. If you've ever reached that point, where silence no longer feels heavy, but freeing, you understand why I didn't say anything else. I didn't need the last word. I already had something better. I had my own voice back. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They unfolded. Quietly. By Monday morning, the bank had already frozen the mortgage. Kesler called me just before noon. "It's flagged as fraudulent," he said. "They've suspended everything." No urgency in his voice. Because this was expected. Predictable. When truth enters a system built on paper, it moves quickly. My father couldn't access the money. Couldn't refinance. Couldn't shift it somewhere else. It was just there. A number tied to something that was no longer his. By the afternoon he was served. A knock at his door. Documents in hand. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just official. And that's the thing about consequences. They don't need to raise their voice. They just show up. The investigation started the same day. Forgery. Fraud. Words that carry weight, even before anything is proven. The notary was named. And unlike my father, he didn't try to hold the line. He cooperated, which meant the story didn't stay contained. It spread. Not like gossip, like confirmation. By Tuesday evening, the church board made their decision. He stepped down. No announcement. No speech. Just removed. Some of you listening have seen this before. When someone's reputation doesn't collapse loudly, it just stops being protected. Clients began canceling. Quiet messages. Short calls. "Don't come by. We'll find someone else." No arguments. Just distance. The same kind that filled that room on Sunday. He called me that night. Late. I almost didn't answer. But I did. "You destroyed me," he said. His voice wasn't angry. That surprised me. It was empty, like something had already settled inside him. I sat there for a moment before responding. No, I said. I stopped covering for you. A pause. Longer than any we had shared before. Because this wasn't an argument. There was nothing left to defend. He hung up. No goodbye. And for the first time in my life, that silence didn't feel like rejection. It felt like separation. Clean. Necessary. If you've ever reached that point, where someone's absence stops hurting and starts making sense, you know exactly what changed in that moment. Not him. Me. The next thing that surfaced wasn't something I expected. It wasn't about the house, or the church, or even the case. It was something quieter, older. Kesler found it while reviewing my records again. Routine, he called it. A detail most people would have missed. 3 years ago, he said over the phone, your life insurance beneficiary was changed. I sat still. Not tense. Not surprised. Just waiting. To your father. Of course. The words didn't hit me the way they should have. Because by then, there was no version of him left in my mind that wouldn't do this. I never signed anything, I said. I know, Kesler replied. The signature doesn't match your verified documents. Forgery. Again. But this one felt different. Not bigger. Just clearer. Because it answered a question I hadn't even allowed myself to ask. What if I hadn't survived? The room felt colder. Not physically. Just in a way that settled somewhere deeper. He had a plan. Not just for control, but for outcome. And in every version of that outcome, I wasn't part of it. Some of you listening understand this kind of realization. When you stop asking, why would they do this? And start understanding, they already decided who you were to them. I wasn't a daughter. I was a liability, an expense, a number that could eventually turn into something else. I ended the call quietly, sat there for a long time. Not crying, not angry, just still. Because there's a point where emotions don't spike anymore. They settle into something steadier, something that doesn't react. It knows. That evening, my phone rang again. Meredith. I let it ring once. Twice. Then I answered. Her voice was already breaking. I need to tell you something. I didn't say anything. Because I already knew this wasn't going to be simple. I knew about the DNR, she said. There it was. Not shocking. But final. I was there, she continued. He told me what he was going to do. I closed my eyes. Not to escape. Just to hold steady. And you didn't stop him. It wasn't a question. No, she whispered. Silence. The kind that fills space without asking permission. And the house, she added, her voice smaller now. I knew about that too. Of course. He said he'd give me $85,000 if I stayed quiet. I let that sit. Because this wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was agreement. I was scared of him, she said quickly. I've always been scared of him. I believed that part. Fear had lived in that house long before I understood what it was. But fear doesn't erase choices. It's not an excuse, I said. No, she replied. It's not. She was crying now. Loud. Uncontrolled. The way she used to cry when we were kids. Back when I thought it was my job to fix things for her. It wasn't. Not then. Not now. I'm not asking you to forgive me, she said. I know I don't deserve it. You're right, I said gently. Not right now. A pause. But I'm not closing the door completely either. She stopped crying for a second, like she hadn't expected that. If you want to build something different, I added, you know where to find me. No promises. No guarantees. Just a boundary. She exhaled shakily. Grandma sent me a letter too, she said. That caught me off guard. What did it say? A long pause. Then, She said I was too much like him. I didn't respond. Because some truths don't need commentary. They told me to choose differently, she whispered. I sat with that. Because in the end, that's what this was always about. Choice. Not what happened to us, but what we do with it. If you've ever had to draw a line between who you were raised to be and who you decide to become, you know how quiet that decision feels. Not dramatic, just final. A month later, the house was back in my name. No ceremony, no announcement, just a call from Kesler. It's done, he said. The court voided the transfer. I stood in Deborah's kitchen when he told me. Morning light coming through the window. Coffee untouched on the counter. Thank you, I said. He paused. Thank your grandmother, he replied. And somehow, that felt more accurate. Because none of this started with me. It started with someone who saw the truth early and chose to act on it quietly. The case against my father moved forward. Forgery, fraud, mortgage fraud, words that sound heavy, but are really just labels for choices already made. His attorney negotiated a plea. Restitution, probation, no prison, not mercy, just process. He sold his house. It wasn't enough. The rest would follow him for years. Debt has a way of staying, especially when it's built on something that was never yours. I heard he moved in with his brother. I didn't confirm it. I didn't need to. Because for the first time, his life wasn't something I was responsible for understanding. Meredith kept her distance. Not completely gone, but not present either. A space, waiting to see what she would choose next. And me? I went back to work. Slowly at first. Short shifts. Familiar hallways. Pat didn't say much. She just handed me a new schedule and nodded. Like nothing needed to be explained. Like she already knew. Some of you listening understand that kind of support. The kind that doesn't ask for updates. Because it trusts that you're rebuilding in your own time. Life didn't reset. It didn't become perfect. But it became mine. And that was enough. Because healing isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up in small things. In choices. In boundaries. In the quiet absence of something that used to weigh you down. I didn't feel stronger. Not in a dramatic way. I just felt clearer. And clarity changes everything. I drove to the house on a Saturday. No plan. No urgency. Just a quiet pull I couldn't ignore anymore. Elm Street looked exactly the same. Same sidewalks. Same trees leaning slightly toward the road. Nothing about it suggested how much had changed. I parked in front of the house. Sat there for a moment. Hands resting on the steering wheel. Because this wasn't just a place. It was the first thing in my life that was truly mine. Not earned through approval. Not negotiated through guilt. Given. Protected. I stepped out of the car slowly. The air felt different here. Quieter. Not empty. Just undemanding. I walked up to the front door. Key in my hand. My key. That thought stayed with me longer than I expected. I unlocked the door, pushed it open, and stepped inside. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Lavender. Soft. Familiar. My grandmother used to keep small sachets in every drawer. A detail no one else would think to preserve. But somehow, it was still there. Like she had prepared this moment too. I closed the door behind me. No voices. No tension. No expectation waiting in the next room. Just space. I walked slowly through the living room. The kitchen. The hallway. Everything simple. Everything still. And for the first time, I wasn't walking carefully. I wasn't adjusting myself to fit into someone else's version of who I should be. I just moved. Some of you listening know this feeling. When a place doesn't ask anything from you, and that alone feels like relief. I sat down in her old chair near the window, the same one she used every afternoon. The light hit the floor the same way I remembered. Time hadn't changed this space, but it had changed me. I didn't reach for my phone, didn't turn on the TV. I just sat there and let the silence exist without trying to fill it. Because for the first time in my life, silence didn't mean something was wrong. It meant nothing was being taken from me. No pressure, no reminders, no quiet calculations about what I owed. Just presence. I leaned back slightly, closed my eyes, and for a moment, I thought about everything that had happened. Not the details, not the events, just the shift. From being managed to being self-directed, from being defined to defining. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt like something much simpler, something I hadn't realized I was missing. Permission. Permission to exist, without explanation. And once you feel that, you don't really want anything else. If you're still here with me, tell me something honestly. What's one boundary you set that changed your life? I stayed in that chair longer than I planned. Not because I was tired, because I wasn't being pulled anywhere. No expectations, no pressure, no voice in the back of my mind reminding me what I owed or who I was supposed to be. Just stillness. And for the first time, stillness didn't feel like something I needed to escape. It felt like something I could finally trust. I used to think healing would feel bigger than this. Like a moment, a breakthrough, something undeniable. But it wasn't. It was quieter. It looked like sitting in a house that belonged to me, breathing without asking permission, and realizing nothing was about to be taken away. That realization didn't come all at once. It settled slowly, like something finding its place after being misplaced for years. I thought about my father, not with anger, not even with sadness, just distance. Because hating him would have meant staying connected to him, and I wasn't interested in that anymore. He made his choices, clear ones, consistent ones, and for the first time, I wasn't trying to reinterpret them into something softer. I wasn't asking why. I wasn't asking how could you. I already knew, and knowing was enough. Some of you listening understand this shift. When you stop chasing explanations and start accepting patterns, that's where peace begins. Not in forgiveness, not in forgetting, but in clarity. I stood up eventually, walked through the house one more time, not checking anything, not fixing anything, just existing in it. The kitchen, the hallway, the small room where my grandmother used to fold laundry while telling stories that never asked anything from me in return. I stopped at the doorway for a second, because I realized something simple. This house wasn't just something she left behind. It was something she made sure I could return to. Not just physically, but emotionally. A place where I didn't have to perform, didn't have to compensate, didn't have to prove I was worth staying. I picked up my keys, walked back to the front door. Before I stepped outside, I paused. Not to look back, but to notice what I felt. Nothing heavy, nothing unfinished. Just space. The kind you don't rush to fill. The kind you protect. If this story stayed with you in some way, stay for a second longer. Tell me where you're listening from. I read more of those than you think. And if something in this felt familiar, that quiet wait, that slow realization, that moment where you finally chose yourself, you're not alone in that. This space was built for that kind of truth. We don't shout here. We don't chase revenge. We just stand. We don't shout. We stand. Subscribe. Because stories like this, they're not about winning. They're about seeing clearly and choosing differently when it matters. And if you've ever had to do that, quietly, without applause, without permission, then you already understand what this was. Not revenge. Just a boundary that finally held. The next story is waiting. And something tells me you'll recognize yourself in that one too.